All right, sweet, sweet. I was just saying, not only do we have a bunch of great things to talk about tonight, I also have a couple of clinical insights, which we haven't done. And thank you for the thumbs up. Appreciate that, folks. I haven't done these clinical insights a little bit, so I have two there, really three I want to share today. So I'll try to get them done fast. So you ready to dive right in?
Let's go for it, Bart.
All right, sweet. So clinical insights, and just a little reminder on the clinical insights. These are just things that I see on a daily basis that I think could have value if I get to share them. So there's no precursor and how or why they're here, other than I had this happen in practice and go, maybe I should share this one because this is probably something common or some other value that people can have. So the first one, 71-year-old female. I've seen her for several years now. I might have even talked about her on this podcast again. I see her about every other month for a tune-up or a checkup, roughly there between 2 and 3 months, which is fantastic. And she's 71 years old and she exercises 7 days a week.
That is so awesome and inspiring. Wow.
It really is. And so I asked her, I asked her, what is your routine? So every day she walks between 4 and 4.5 miles every day. That's 7 days a week. And then 3 days a week, she includes weightlifting. And it's a conversation that I've had with her for years about she must get stronger, not maintain, that she must get stronger if she wants to be here for a real long time and be, a superhuman woman. So she is doing just that. She lifts weights and she says she makes it hard every time and does that 3 days a week. And then the other 3 days, she combines either some version of cardio and yoga. So a little shout out to my dear there. That's absolutely awesome. 71 years old. And listen, even if you can't do 7 days a week, you can do something. Right? We can always do something.
We can.
Yeah. And when we are moving and we're doing something for ourselves, it just makes us better all the way around. So I think that's my message for that one. Everyone just keep moving, keep doing your thing. All right. Clinical insight number 2, a little bit of a different story. 44-year-old male, he and his wife just moved here recently, literally in the last 3 weeks. And they came here to have a new beginning with their health. Which is really interesting. And I come across, in my world, I do come across a lot of people that they've decided somehow or another that they have to have or go on a health journey. And I always know that when I hear that, I have to pay close attention because it's not something that is common. It's not hip. It's not cool to then say, I got to take care of myself. And here's a 44-year-old guy, he's a dad, he's a husband, he's got a lot of pride. But also at the same time, being very humble and saying, I'm a mess. I wish that more people to some degree would say that because that's a way of reaching out and getting help. And lo and behold, we had no idea that his chiropractic adjustment, visit was going to turn into a strategy session for moving in the right direction for his health and for his life, really. So the good news is, so when I asked him, why do you got to take a health journey? He said, everything's going backwards. Every time I exercise, I get injured. The more I do, the worse it gets. I feel like I'm angry all the time. I feel like I'm gaining weight and he looked at his body. He's like, my muscles are going away. And I could feel just the kind of disgust to some level that he was having with his own body. And I don't think that's unique. Unfortunately, a lot of people get to a point where this isn't working for me. So I really give this guy a lot of credit. And I said that to him. I said, you're doing what most won't do in your shoes, especially my guys out there. They won't humble up and say, I need to do something different. And he and his wife both recognized it. He talked about his wife, her health a little bit, and same thing. It was being completely derailed. So the beauty of the reason I'm sharing this is that in order for things to change, it is we that must change. And he said that to me. He said, I know in order for things to change, I must be the change. And it's so true that there's no one magic lotion or potion out there. It is the choice to move forward and kind of having at least some degree of where you want to go or where you want to head up or what you're looking for. So a little kudos to that gentleman. And hopefully his wife is on board with wherever they're going to head. Because their journeys moving forward may look different. They may have different goals. And the beauty is that they have literally moved. They moved from out of state here to just start fresh. And hopefully they will find some new, and what sounds like for him, he already did. For a guy at 44 years old to be that humble and say, I'm in trouble here. I don't hear that as often as I probably should, yet I'm enthusiastic about where it's going to go for him.
I have to tell you, Bart, both of those stories are equally inspiring to me. And something that I hear in the two of them is this conscious action. So maybe you're 70 and you've been walking 7 days a week for 40 years. Maybe you're 40 and you just started 7 days ago, like walking 7 days a week. It's incredible that you can make these changes, literally being the change, and could really start to change like how you feel.
It's so funny you say that, and so spot on, because the conversation with the gentleman then moved into, he said, do you think I can make change? Do you think I can, what he really said, do you think I can be as healthy as you are? And I take it as a compliment, and I'm a bit older than him. I'm whatever, 6, 7 years older than him. And I said, 100%. That's one thing I have an unrelentless faith in, is that the human body, when given what it needs, it's unbelievable. There's no limitations. And the fact that he's only 44 years old, he's not 74 years old. So if he was, I wish my 71-year-old patient was in the room. She would have chuckled and said, my goodness, you got 30 years before you're even my age. So that consciousness, and I don't know if I don't know if it's becoming more and more prevalent in culture and society, yet I certainly feel as though there's more of it happening. And maybe it's just because of the environment we're in, but I think just generally, a lot of people are waking up to the idea that maybe I should take a little better care of myself. Maybe this would be a fun journey.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the more information that's available is people kind of like have different avenues to explore health options. I'm 40 and I remember being 20 and feeling like a lot of the health information that I have today wasn't like as accessible at that time. So it's very cool to have access and like learn about these things I can do myself without really needing to be like led specifically through like a bunch of doctor's appointments. Like I can actually just change what I eat for lunch.
Yes, that's one of the beautiful things that right now, and I say it all the time, like, and I'd love to help everyone that ever listens to our podcast. Yet if it's not me, there's a lot of amazing men and women out there. And there's programs and there's apps and there's things you can follow on Instagram. They can be free, you can pay for them, but there are certainly plenty of opportunities. So the third one, and this was not by design, but the third one, I guess now that I'm thinking about it, it fits right into these other two. So it's a story of two different ladies that I take care of, and they're both yogis and they're both 50 plus, and they're headed essentially in a little bit of a different directions. And anyone that's listened to the Health Made Simple podcast before know that I am a big advocate of women, especially making sure that you are staying strong, you are lifting weights, you are doing hard shit. Like, it has to happen. We have to keep our muscle tone. If you don't move it, you lose it. In this scenario, I have these two ladies, and they're very healthy individuals. One is focusing on building muscle strength and getting stronger. And what I see and observe from that is everything that goes with physically getting stronger kind of overflows into the body and the mind and the spirit. They become stronger human beings. And then the opposite has happened in the other one. They're not working on their strength whatsoever. And they're not getting overweight or anything like that, but they're not working on getting strong. And I can feel and see the bodies start to become weaker. And I really believe that whether it's how we move, eat, or think, but the stronger we get in any one category overlaps to the next one. And unfortunately, it can go the opposite way as well, where our weakness, if not checked, can really kind of influx or influence the others as well. So that kind of fits in only in the sense that, again, I'm just observing behaviors here, and our actions that we take every day, and especially for my ladies. I think I'm sharing this one because I want to remind every lady out there, guys too, but guys usually will lift weights. Ladies, you got to stay strong, right? So all these years, the first couple of years, you want to do yoga and all that stuff, wonderful, and that gets you really strong. Yet at some point, you will start to lose muscle mass at a rapid pace, and they call that sarcopenia. That's like the medical term for it. And that's a very important, that's a big term in the medical community, sarcopenia. That is muscle wasting. And what happens, literally, it starts to come off faster and faster. Not at the same rate it used to be. You lose muscle mass. And that's also where the phrase of skinny fat came from, where the body will maintain the exact same size and shape, but the body density is changing. So instead of having tissue in arms that are full of muscle, you have tissue in arms that are just really full of fat and tissue instead of being strong. So I want to encourage all the ladies out there, if you're not doing anything to keep you strong, doing a little weight lift in, see how you can figure out to bring it on into your schedule and have fun with it. Right? Doesn't mean you have to be a gym rat, or maybe it does.
I have only recently learned that like weightlifting can be fun. Frankly, it was definitely like a place where I felt like a bit of an alien. And I've had some experiences recently where it's actually like I don't know, you like do it with a friend, get your sweat on. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it really is. And maybe it's just, even if it's just cool because now you've just discovered and experienced something else new in your life. Right. And I 100% I get, and I think sometimes I do forget, and I appreciate you mentioning that you feel like an alien, because none of us want to do something and look foolish at it, or do it the wrong way. So I think it's just like someone for the first time ever, like knowing yoga would be good for them, but they don't want to go to a class and embarrass themselves. And we see that and can identify it so easily now because we've seen so much of it. So we might say, oh, maybe you followed this video for a little while, or maybe you do a private instruction, or tiptoe into it. And the same thing with weights, whatever it takes, whether you go down to Target and buy yourself some hand weights, but getting used to it. I typically do recommend, though, to follow and figure out how to do it properly so you don't injure yourself, and do it in such a way that it also has measurable gains. There's something to be said about measuring your results. And in weightlifting, it's very identifiable, which is fun. So maybe, this week you can curl 5 pounds, and in 2 months, you're curling 10 pounds. And so it just feels good. Everyone feels good when they're strong. So just a little shout out to all the ladies out there, guys too, of course, but ladies out there, you got to get strong and stay strong.
And stay strong. Awesome.
Yes. All right. So those are my clinical insights for the night.
I love your clinical insights because they come from real experiences and they're so identifiable. Thank you, Bart, for sharing those.
Of course.
Should we slide into a couple of questions that we had come in through the week?
Yeah, let's dive in. There's some really good ones here, and they're always hot topics. So let's dive in.
So this first one, I love learning about it. And I know it's something that we see a lot. So here's the question. I've had sleeping problems for years, and I've tried everything. Any help would be appreciated.
Okay, so when it comes to sleep, this is huge. Often, I try to explain to everyone, there's 2 things that we should be able to do with ease, and we should be really good at these 2 things in our lives, and that's sleeping and pooping. And the reality is most of us are not. We're rarely good at both. Occasionally we're good at one, but often, very rarely, we're good at both of those. So let's talk about sleep for a moment, because the better you sleep, the better human you really are. A well-rested human is someone that has the availability to heal appropriately, to heal their mind, to calm their mind, to heal their body, and get up and get after it again the next day without having essentially a detrimental or a negative impact. So there's really 3 things. So everyone listening, if you think you have a sleep problem, listen to these first couple of questions, because half the strategies, and especially when I hear someone that says they've tried everything, it's a little bit of a red flag on a couple levels. If you say you've tried everything for your knee pain, for your neck pain, shoulder, a little bit of red flag in general. Instead of moving away from those things, always be inviting of, I'm still looking for what my body needs. And that's the mentality versus I've tried everything. If I've tried everything, then there's nothing you can do. There's literally nothing you can do. Yet if you're still open, and I know this individual that they're sending the question, obviously they're open. So that little verbiage right there is important. So when it comes to sleep, there's 3 questions we want to ask to start off to find out if you actually have a sleeping problem at all. So the first is, do you have a problem falling asleep? Do you have a problem staying asleep? Or do you have a problem waking up, meaning you wake up tired? So that's where we really need to start with. And I find that the majority of cases, not all of them, but I'd probably say in the 60 to 70% of the time, it is a staying asleep issue. Of that 60 to 70%, usually 80 to 90% of that group falls in a very specific time frame, which is fascinating. And they're waking up between 1 and 4 a.m. Of all the people that say they wake up every night. Now, that excludes if you're waking up and you say, man, I don't have I'm a poor sleeper, and you're getting up to go to the bathroom. That's different. You're getting up to go to the bathroom. You're not a poor sleeper. You have to use the bathroom a lot. Those are 2 different things. You don't have a sleep issue. In the event that you fall asleep, okay, but you wake up during the course of the night, you don't have a sleeping problem, you're having a waking problem, or really what I would call a staying asleep problem, not a falling asleep problem. And that way we can understand how to kind of go about and, helping your body do this a little bit better. And again, anything that I share in our podcast are never designed to be medical advice. So of course, take it with a grain of salt, and also know that, this is just advice to help your body function better. We're not trying to treat anything. And that's kind of my disclaimer on everything here. All right. So if in the event that you have an issue staying asleep and you're waking up every night, there's the probably the most popular thing that we find to be beneficial is using magnesium at night. So magnesium is a yin mineral, very, very supportive of the body. It calms the body down. Often your body runs out of the fundamentals that it needs, the tools that it needs to stay asleep, magnesium being one of them. Your liver uses magnesium for probably 200-300 different enzymatic reactions. And if you run out of it, boom, body wakes up. And coincidentally, with that time frame between 1 and 4 a.m., that is very specific to letting us know that that is a liver kind of congestion with your liver. That is your liver. That's especially in Chinese medicine. That tells us the liver is heating up. It's overworking that time frame. So there's other things that can contribute to that. So typically, that's how easy for a lot of people. Just adding magnesium. We use a very specific one that's really gentle on the gut. It does help cross the blood-brain barriers. So it's kind of very inviting for the body. It's called magnesium lactate. Usually I recommend between 3 and 4 capsules, about an hour, sometime before bed. It's easy breezy. That's a yin mineral, and that often will help us stay asleep. So that's typically where we start. In the event, so what often happens is people think, man, I'm waking up because I got so much on my mind. Because they wake up and then they start to think. And that's really not a thinking issue, because they were sleeping. They weren't thinking about anything. It is that they ran out of the tools that the body needed to fall asleep or to stay asleep. And then they wake up and then they have busy mind.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think we've all kind of found ourselves in the middle of the night, like, why am I not sleeping? And then that even becomes like the thought pattern that we slide into. But in the case that anyone is interested in like knowing a little bit more about this magnesium, I just put a little link into our chat here so you can have a look.
So there's more to that as well. So that would be the primary reason that we run low on these minerals. There's other reasons that we could wake up in the middle of the night. The second and probably most popular reason is blood sugar imbalance. And that usually is simply caused by a late night snack. So, and it's very common. I think we all have been there before. We have that late night snack. We eat dinner maybe at a reasonable time, 6, 7 o'clock, then 8, 9, maybe 10 o'clock at night, you have something. And when you do that, the blood sugar goes up. And then a couple hours after that, it drops back down. And that's when we often see people wake up again. So it could be a blood sugar imbalance. And especially if you wake up and you're really, really hungry during that time frame. I'm going to suggest you probably don't need to eat during that time frame yet. Just be paying attention and kind of working on the habits prior to that. So that's usually the simple part there. So I want to back this up and kind of go back to what happens if you're not falling asleep. So that's a little bit of a challenge. Every one of us should be able to fall asleep. The biggest challenge we have there is we get in our own way, meaning that our lifestyles, the things that we're doing, oftentimes that's the phone and whatnot, inhibits the normal sleep rhythm of being able to fall asleep. So real quickly, it works like this, that as the sun goes down, our eyes start to adjust, and it sends a little message into our brain, to our hypothalamus, that sends a message on to our pineal gland, says, hey, release a little bit of melatonin. And that happens as a result of the light changing. And this is important to understand. This is why it is often us that are messing this up. So your body releases from the pineal gland melatonin, which is responding to the light. So what happens as the sun goes down, we're supposed to get a little drowsy, whatever the sunset happens, we should kind of like ease into quiet time and then eventually falling asleep. The challenge is that most people are then turning on the TV and or their phone, which would be even worse. And we have, a device sometimes so maybe my screen right now is a little foot or two away, but sometimes these phones are literally, a foot from our eyeballs. and they're lighting it up, which tells our body, tells our hormones, this is not sleep time, folks. This is wide awake time. And that right now is probably the most chronic condition when it comes to why people do not fall asleep.
So I suppose like watching a really excellent movie is the last thing you do before you go to bed would not be the best preparation for a good night's sleep.
You know, it's interesting. So it's interesting. So because there are certain people who say, you know what, I watch TV to fall asleep. So I'll address that real quickly. And sometimes I fall into that category. Although you may fall asleep because you've literally exhausted your eyes. But that's not really good for your brain and the biochemistry of your body. So you're falling asleep, yet it's not a real solid sleep. You typically in the back end of that will end up waking up because you're out of balance here. And then sometimes we use TV or, you know, maybe countless hours of ESPN or different shows, whatever it may be, to just give our mind a break. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that there's times that we need to distract ourselves from our busy lifestyles. Especially if you're super motivated and got a million different projects going on. Sometimes the timeout is to give your energy and effort to maybe, you know, a creative movie or something like that. But knowing your own body and knowing your own emotions and what type of movie you watch before bed, I think is very, very significant. The types of movies that I love to watch will not let my wife go to bed. There's no chance. So I love all the movies that there's loud noises and things are blowing up and people are about to die and all that stuff. My wife watches that, she's not sleeping. So we don't make that mistake, especially right before bedtime. So let's talk about a couple of strategies, because this is what really helps people. So some of the strategies we use in the office, if in the event you're having a hard time unwinding, and sometimes it's just because we are wound up and we have a lot of stress. And this is pretty legit. I won't talk about like the effect of your adrenal glands, because that's a whole nother category, because that could play a role here as well. Let's just say that you're wound up and your mind is you're going too hard, too fast, and you can't shut it off. That's where there's an herb out there called kava. We've talked about a lot here on the Health Made Simple show. It is one of my absolute favorite for flipping the switch, going from that sympathetic dominance, relatively a fight or flight, which is also a creative and creative, proactive, energetic part of your body and your mood. And it's swinging that pendulum into the parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. There's nothing better than kava to do that safely, easily, and quickly. That's the key here, quickly. So we use kava. And the beauty of that too is that when you use it, it works. When you don't need it, you don't need to use it. So it's not something that's addictive. It's safe for the body. We use a water soluble one. That's important to mention here. A lot of people, when they look up that herb, this is what we do. We look up what are the side effects of, and then you fill in the blank. Even though it's a vitamin, a mineral, herb, we don't do it. It's weird. We don't do that when it comes to our drugs, but we sure do it when it comes to vitamins and minerals. But nonetheless, we look up side effects of kava, and you read some of the headlines. And all of those studies that sound not so awesome about like your liver and stuff like that, those are all based on synthetics, not on the natural herb that comes from God's garden. So we've used it, and it's water-based and it's safe. So that's number one. If you know that you run in the anxious world, a great pairing to that, very similar to the way we use magnesium as a mineral, we use something called Minchex. It's kind of unique to the company that I typically use, Standard Process. Minchex is a mineral-based product, and it's very calming to the body. So if I pair those two, I'm not only helping the individual sleep, but I'm giving them the tools to then develop good sleeping, essentially sleeping tools down the road. So becoming a healthier sleeper. Now the simple stuff goes, the phone's got to go. I've had people argue with me, phone doesn't matter. I put my phone down, I still can't fall asleep. Well, that you've gone too far. So if you plan on going to bed around 9 o'clock, it'll be more of an emotional discipline to stay off of this very, very addictive thing, social media that we have. And I say it's an emotional thing. That's all it is we are hooked, and they know it. And we know it, but we rarely will admit it. And every one of us is. So kudos to those who really are putting down their phone, at 8 or 9 o'clock. I think that's actually huge. I can't say I'm in that category yet. Some nights are better than others. So if we're falling asleep, kava, fantastic. Usually pair that with mint checks. If you're having a hard time staying asleep, usually I'll use something called what I would discuss, magnesium lactate. Now, with all that being said, there's one other thing we often do that I use in most of my protocols. And when it comes to sleep, I'll usually encourage to stair step the strategies. Don't try them all at one time, even if it requires you to end up doing all of them. Start one at a time so you see where you can have success. Yet there's another one that we blend. It's a liquid herb blend called the Chill Out Tonic. This kind of came upon, I guess, creation after years and years and years of trying to help people master their sleep. And this is one of the absolute best products. We concocted, this is something we blend in our office. So you have to get it through, by calling it. So if you do want it, and it's a group of different liquid blends. I don't say that they taste good, but I don't think they taste bad either.
Art, I'm going to say that they taste good.
All right, fair enough.
I'm going to say it.
I get in trouble all the time because I think they all kind of taste good. And I don't know if it's just because my brain says this is good for me, so this must taste good. Yeah, the Chill Out Tonic is kind of nice. Got a little bit of licorice root in it. It has liquid valerian root, so it's really, really fast acting. And for those of you that understand some of the herbals, especially valerian, valerian has the ability to help the pineal gland produce more melatonin. So it's a phenomenal herb to use, especially low dose over long periods of time. So the Chill Out Tonic is another one we add in there. And then all the others that people hear of. There are some others that if you came here to my house, would you see different things? CBD oil. I love it. And listen, there's a ton of good brands out there. Make sure that you know what you're getting and where you're getting, because there's also a bunch of junk out there. We use a hemp oil here in our office. I'll typically use that the nights that I train hard in the evening because my body will be a little bit more beat up. So I like that ability to, do a little pain modulation as well as make sure my body's comfortable to sleep. So those are really the topics. Beginning of the night, if you can't fall asleep, it's kava, Chill Out Tonic, mint checks, hard time falling asleep. Then we're going to move into the magnesium, watching the food, the blood sugar levels. Then of course you can use Chill Out Tonic to just kind of make sure you fall asleep and stay asleep.
I think, since the Chill Out Tonic entered our world, it's become like a big favorite. And I'm here to tell you, it tastes pretty good.
Yeah. Nice.
And just to ask, like specifically kind of for the magnesium, is that something that you would also use just as needed, or is that like a mineral that's generally pretty helpful for us all the time?
That's one, Whitney, that typically I recommend. It's a daily supplement. Magnesium is needed for so many different things. Magnesium is utilized in about 300 or more different enzymatic reactions in the body. And as a result of that, it's used up quite frequently. And more so, magnesium is depleted by stress, by sugar, and by alcohol about twice the rate. And then if you throw in poor sleep, we've got the trifecta or even more there. So we lose magnesium very easily. And although we can get it from your vegetables and whatnot, to bring it back in copious amounts, or at least decent fair amounts, supplementing it, probably smart. I think some of the statistics out there say that 8 out of 10 Americans are deficient in magnesium, especially if if you have sugar in your life, you have carbohydrates and alcohol, there's always a deficiency that takes place.
Heard. Well, I want to share a little bit of shout outs that we got on Facebook through chatting about that. Diane loves kava. Kelly loves the Chill Out Tonic. Emma says the Chill Out is wonderful. And here's something really sweet. I want to shout out our friend Jean. Jean shared that to go back to this, what we were talking about earlier with the clinical insights. She lost a lot of weight, but the last month she's been using weights with a personal trainer, and she feels happier and has more energy in just a short period of time. In fact, she went from using 5-pound weights to 20 pounds. That is awesome, Jean.
Wow, 400% increase. That's amazing. So those side effects right there, that's what I mean. That's real. Stronger you are, you make yourself a stronger human being. It means your capacity increases. Capacity to love, capacity to handle things, capacity all across the board get better when we are stronger. And it also means physically we become stronger on every level in our lives. So thank you, Jean, for sharing that, and keep rocking on. That's literally amazing. You're changing the trajectory of your life, which is awesome.
That is incredible. One more here, Diane, for her. She finds that magnesium is a game changer, helping to reduce migraines, which is a great benefit.
Yeah, so that's another good case for people, especially if you suffer with migraines. That should be the number one go-to. And again, often I'll share step. If someone comes in with migraines, first things first, magnesium. And you want, there's a lot of different types. You just want to make sure that you have one that you're really comfortable with and understand how it's facilitated in the body, which really means how easy is it to absorb into the body. That's one of the reasons we use the one that we do.
That's awesome. Well, those are some really incredible tools for getting good rest. I wonder, should we go to the next question, which is a little related here? We ready for it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's say that you are moving your body in ways that feels awesome. Here is our question. How do I know if I should stretch when I'm injured?
Okay, so with a question like this, so the question being, should I stretch if I'm injured? And this is a really good question, because oftentimes this gets confused, and sometimes our head gets in the way here. So I want to back this question up a little bit and really say it's important, before we decide whether or not we should stretch, we have to become more and more aware of our own bodies. So I'll give the technical answer in a moment here. And one of the ways we figure that out is we determine whether or not this is an acute injury or a chronic injury. Yet it's also important to find out, and what that means. So acute and chronic means that acute means this just happened. So for example, like an athlete, and it is important to understand the difference between this just happened. This is actually really good direction for this conversation. An athlete gets hit and there's a trauma involved. And that's how we have to start to think, was there a trauma involved with this injury? And that's why I'm experiencing pain. So an athlete might sprain an ankle, or you don't have to be an athlete. Maybe you trip and fall down. Maybe you're chasing your kids and you twist an ankle, or whatever it may be. But if there's an acute injury like that, usually it is old school RICE: rest, ice, compress, and elevate. That means no stretching, no massaging, don't twist it, don't bend it, don't stretch it, leave it alone. It's so interesting how our ego, somehow we think, and even though it's really, really painful to stretch, if I stretch it harder, maybe it'll get better. And then we see other strategies where someone might have neck pain and they think maybe I need to get the world's deepest massage.
Yeah, we love to go to our massage therapist and tell them, like, yes, like dig in there more.
Yeah,
maybe
which is
not always the best strategy, right?
No, not always. It's very interesting. So where there's fire, and that's how we want to think of as in like injuries, right? Where there's fire, are we going to add fire? Or are we going to calm it down? And that's where the chronic comes in. So in chronic situations, we're just always got an achy, sore shoulder, always the same spot in the neck. The body's, gaining weight is a chronic health condition. Losing range of motion is a chronic condition. So we wouldn't tear the body so much we're all of a sudden just going to try to change that in 1 second. So we should stretch the chronically tight stuff, but the acutely damaged stuff, we leave it alone. Most important part of this conversation is, hands down, for all of us to start to peek in a little bit closer and know our own bodies better.
Yeah, it really helps to have a baseline of where you're at, so you can notice when things change and kind of when it happens to determine if it's like a chronic or acute, right?
Yeah, and even if those words don't come up, to be able to ask yourself, the first thing we should be asking ourselves when we have an injury, the very first thing that is asked, and I've got 25 years experience at this, is what's wrong with me? That is not the first question that should be asked, though. The first question that should be asked is, or that would certainly serve us better, would be, what is my body asking for? It never lies. It will argue. Well, it won't argue. Your ego will argue with it. Your schedule will argue with it. Yeah, and everything that's going on in your life will argue with it. Your body will never lie. So if you have a headache and you simply just ask, what is my body asking me for? it'll come up with, hey man, this is an easy breezy one. Just lie down for 10 minutes, please. Always. That's always an answer for a headache. Close your eyes, stay still. We argue with it though. We argue with that version of our reality saying, oh, I can't do this. This doesn't, I got to keep going. Except, so it's not really the question at that point. You're not really looking to listen to your body. You're really not trying to heal your body. You're trying to shut your body up. You're trying to dishonor the gift that you were given. And I know that sounds a little bit deep, and it needs to be. We need to get back to recognizing that we were given these gifts and they're brilliant, and they have markers, they have systems of communicating with us. Part of that system, part of those markers is pain. And it's one of the things that will save our lives if we start to have the proper relationship with it. I promise you, there's never been a headache caused by a lack of Advil, right? It almost sounds silly that I do that. Yet when we have pain, when we have discomfort in the body, we're often looking to make it go away as fast as can be. And one of the other things I'll see I think there's another component, and I'm not trying to belittle anyone in their approach toward it. I think it's the way we've been taught. The second part that's not serving us well is the fear we attach to it. And I also think that's programming. I think if we were taught from a younger age, say, oh, listen, what is your body trying to tell you? Every time you put weight on your right knee, it hurts. What's your body asking you for? Rather, we ask, what's wrong with me? How fast can this go away? Not even what did I do? It's rarely even not what did I do? And if we head down that path, inevitably, we're going to make decisions to ultimately tell our body to shut up, not necessarily to get healthier, but tell our body to shut up. And that's when we get ourselves in a little bit of trouble.
I find that it's, that simple question of like, what is my body asking me for? I feel like I can do that. I can like ask that question, but listening to the answer and then responding accordingly, there's the work. Like that's the practice daily to truly respond. Not even like, do I want like this apple over here, or am I like definitely wanting that like candy bar in this moment? Like what's gonna like serve me in this moment? Take this phone call or take a rest. These like opportunities really present themselves all the time, don't they?
Yeah. So what's fascinating by you putting it that way, and you're absolutely right. So you can ask that question, what are we going to do next? But just asking that question does two things for us. So everyone listen close. It's the moment you get to ask that question, you start to deflate the amount of fear that's involved. A lot of our pain is multiplied, is literally manifested even more by the fear of unknown and what will happen if this gets worse. We don't necessarily, well, we kind of do, but we're not necessarily using those words, but we think, oh my goodness, my shoulder, my neck. And then our brains go in these weird ways. Well, I'm going on vacation next week and I got to pick up the kids later and I'm not going to be able to exercise this afternoon. And we start going into this weird space of just fear-driven, thoughts. But by slowing it down and asking, what does my body ask me for? You start to deflate the fear component of it. And then it starts to develop strategy. The second part that it allows us to do is once we can start to ask it, we can then start to use other conversations with ourselves, because it ultimately is going to boil down to the conversation you're having with yourself that determines whether or not you're going to heal. So the next conversation, when you start to say, instead of saying things like, what's wrong with me? Oh my God, this is bad. I'm not going to be able to go on vacation. The faster you can say the simple words of, I'm going to get through this. The faster you say that, you literally go out of sympathetic fight or flight mode into parasympathetic rest, digest, recover, and heal. That is a superpower. And every one of us has that at our fingertips. So that little conversation that we get to have, if there's three things I think people make the biggest mistakes with. And again, I really, really wish I had an opportunity to like teach second graders this and then repeat it again in like 8th grade and then 12th grade and keep doing it. Because we'd have a different culture, different society. The biggest mistake that I think we start off with, we use the wrong words, and we really start to belittle ourselves. We start to put ourselves in a state. We use words, what's wrong with me, what's going on, and then we start to deny everything. I didn't do anything. I wasn't doing anything. I don't know what happened. Something happened to me. We use these different phrases. There's no self-acknowledgement. If you can't acknowledge self within all of that, the self can't heal. You can't heal it. You have to rely on an external modality, a drug, a lotion, potion, or surgery. And that's not very empowering. So the moment we can say, what's my body asking me for? And the quicker we can get to, all right, this will pass. And then you start to develop strategies. Once you do that, everything will feel and look different. So the words we use, critical. The second biggest mistake we make is we put time frames. And the body doesn't heal on our schedule. That's
We as humans love time frames.
yes. Do you know
Love
how
our
many
expectations.
Yeah. Do you know how often I get that question? Doc, how long is this going to take?
Every day uncertain.
Yeah. And there's an answer to that. There's a real answer to that. So there's 3 laws of healing. And there's one is that all healing takes time. And the second is that all healing takes place through cellular replacement. So literally, if you bruise your arm, those cells do not heal. They actually go away and your body sends new one. That's literally what stem cells are there for. So we develop new cells. So when you see a bruise going away, we didn't heal those cells. We sent them away to die. They go to cell death. They go bye-bye. So first law of healing, all healing takes time. Second law of healing is that all healing takes place through cellular replacement. And then the third law of healing is all healing takes place through the simple law of supply and demand. And if you have a high demand to do a lot of healing, you have to supply it with everything it needs. And that is a big, it's a big kind of blank that we throw, because what is that really at the root of it? It's nutrition, sleep, and relaxation. So if we injure our body and then as a result of feeling pain, maybe we have an extra glass of wine. I know no one would do that, listens to this show, but maybe to unwind from stress, which is another source of pain, or anxiety, maybe we drink an extra cocktail. Now all of a sudden our supply and demand, what we demanded from our body, we're not giving it the right tools. We're not supplying it properly. So it's not going to heal. It prolongs itself. You have a headache and you give it an Advil instead of some rest, it's not going to heal. You may buffer it a bit, but what's causing that still remains. So that component right there, the words that we use, really, it's time, cellular replacement, allowing that to take place, and then what we use to help our body heal. So I know this is a long stretch for back to the question of, should I stretch or not when I'm injured? But it goes back to knowing our body and not putting time frames on it, and knowing a little bit, how did this originally get here? More often than not, we're in our own way from healing. I've been able to watch my own body over these years and know that sometimes it seems like I got run over by a truck when I did not. And it's often because my mind is in a certain place and simultaneously I'm putting a beat down on my body, but my mind wasn't in the state that my body needed to. When I say beat down on my body, maybe I'm training super, super hard, or I'm sparring or something like that, yet I'm not fully present. And I wasn't prepared to be there. I didn't sleep properly. I didn't eat properly. I wasn't thinking properly. And then I showed up and I put my body through the ringer. I should expect something to give up at that point. And then all of a sudden, then I can complain. Maybe it's my age. And I see this every day in my clinic. I didn't do anything, or yet they just traveled around the world 4 times and sat in weird planes and trains and automobiles. And they come back and next they try to exercise and injure themselves. And it didn't just happen. It never just happens. It's always in process there. So I know that was a bit away from, should I stretch when I'm injured? Yet if we step back and look at our bodies, it becomes very easy and a little bit of a fun thing to heal up. I'm a faster healer than I've ever been. And I don't think it's because my body's healthier. I think that my mind has gotten healthier. I learned how to ask the better questions. I learned how to shut it down better with age. So that, I think, a roundabout way to answering that question, but there you have it.
Yeah, and I think it's such a cool thing to start to notice your interior dialogue. And just to share briefly that, like, the more aware I become of kind of the questions I ask myself, say when there's a challenge, like an injury, etc., it also makes me aware of like the dialogue I use with others. So it's really softened me kind of seeing someone who, like, I don't know, maybe they're like walking a little differently than I usually see. And so I less say like, ooh, like that looks awful. And instead of like, oh, wow, like, how are you doing? Like, what's going on? Changing my dialogue internally really helps the external shock factor at times.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Whit, because if you're asking other people what's wrong with you, like what's wrong, you're kind of poisoning them too. Yeah, so that's great awareness. Thanks for sharing that, because you're right. And I think if you practice on yourself, when you hear the impact of those words, like what's wrong with me, there's nothing that good comes good after that.
Yeah, we've all had that moment of like, are you okay? And you're like, I think I'm okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Am I okay?
yeah. Yeah. So, being mindful of that, and really having a deeper dive into knowing your own body on multiple levels. How do you feel with exercise? Are you nicer afterwards? Are you aware of how you behave before and after exercise? Are you aware of how you behave after certain foods? Do you know how the foods affect your body? Do you know how alcohol affects your body? Do you know how gluten affects your body? Do you know how sugar affects your body? We certainly are privy to it in children with sugar, right? Yet, have we ever looked in the mirror and said, well, what is it like after I drink some alcohol? Do I get a little louder? Do I become a little inebriated? Am I a little slower in the morning? And that's also what I mean by awareness, maybe not with just injury yet, having an awareness in all categories, how we move, eat, and think. I think that moves us closer and closer to that superhuman status.
Awesome. Awesome. Bart, I think we might have a few minutes here for a couple more questions. What do you think?
Yes, we'll do that. And I'll promise to do them faster.
Okay. So here's a really good one for our parents out there, caregivers. What is the best to help fevers for kids when it is, quote, too high?
Okay. So quickly with fevers, first thing I would acknowledge, nobody, especially a mom or dad, wants to see their child suffering. So I completely get any fever is too high to some degree. Yet also understanding what's medically too high or clinically too high is also important. So when I was in college, chiropractic college for that matter, we always heard that after 105, your brain fries. That is not true. It's really, there's no such data on, I don't believe there's any data. There hasn't been for the last several years, and I haven't checked in the past year, but really when you have to get up to about 107, maybe closer to 108, which you really do not see. So it doesn't mean that there's a lot of massive discomfort prior to that. So that's number one. I just want to acknowledge, one, we really don't have brain damage as a fear and concern when you start to 303 and 104. That's really not the risk. It's just the discomfort. Because again, your body is most likely experiencing something viral, something parasitic, something bacterial, or some kind of drug, some kind of poison in the body, where the body's saying, I have to kill this off. And that's what it uses the fever to do. Yet the method that we use, that we'll often suggest in our office, to make sure that you have at home some calcium lactate powder. This is literally awesome with. The moment you know that whether it's yourself or your child or anyone in your house is the fever rising, the reason we're so uncomfortable because your body absorbs to fight off that fear, the whatever it is, let's call it a bacteria or virus that's causing the fever. Your body utilizes calcium first. And calcium gets completely overlooked when it comes to the immune function. It's the first thing to defend us is calcium. And as you become depleted in calcium is when the pain comes. So when we think of fever, again, instead of trying to eliminate the symptom, how about increasing the function of the human body? And by increasing the amount of calcium, bioavailable calcium, so it's really absorbable by the body. And that's why we use something called calcium lactate. And you can get it in a pill form, but I would suggest to get it in powder. So you can literally mix it for your kids. You can put a little juicy cup, you can put it in water, and then over the next hour or two, you consume a fair amount of it. Usually I have them do at least a teaspoon, and do that over like a 2-hour period of time, just drink and suck on it. And that will help naturally the body maintain the ability to go off and kill things, but the body won't be as uncomfortable. So we're not even trying to get rid of the fever. We're trying to help your loved one not suffer through the fever. No one likes it. Fevers are awful. And it's because your body's trying to create an environment that's not comfortable for anything, especially the bad guys. So I think that's the simple answer there. Calcium lactate powder. It should literally, I recommend everyone have it on your home. It is actually, we did a podcast on your home medicine cabinet one time, and it's in that. That's probably the very first thing that I mentioned, that you want calcium lactate powder, because that's also what you'd use for sunburn and fevers and so many other different things, but super, super beneficial.
Beautiful. And we've got the links there in the chat here on in the case you guys want to check that one out. It is definitely in my home cabinet. All right, let's see if we could slide into this is an awesome question. Okay, calcification was found in my shoulder. What does this mean and how can I heal this?
Okay, so we'll roll through this pretty quick. Typically, if you've been told that you have calcification in the shoulder, you most likely have some version of what they call frozen shoulder. And I'll just do the anatomy real quickly. So the bone they have up here, the bicep and triceps sit on this here, humerus bone, humeral, it sits up in a joint where your scapula, the bone in their back side of your shoulder, there's essentially a joint right in there, a capsule that sits up into. And it's essentially like a ball and socket joint. And there's a bunch of tendons and ligaments, essentially ligaments that connect in there. What happens over time as our postures change and the shoulders start to roll forward, it changes the mechanics of the way that humerus bone sits in that glenoid joint. That's what it's called, the glenoid. The way that it sits up into that joint, and it manipulates the way that it can articulate, meaning your range of motion. The more we keep it in one position, things get deposited in there. Foods, chemicals, you name it, toxins build up in there, and then we lose range of motion. And we'll see this for many reasons. One, we're literally not using the shoulder. We're not actually bringing our hand over our head, reaching behind our back, and just doing all fun, comfortable things with our shoulders. And because the more they hurt, the less we use them. As that calcification builds up and those ligaments become more calcified, they become harder and harder to move, which then transfers all the stress into the rotator cuff muscles. And that's why we see so many rotator cuff tears and whatnot as we age. Now, causation, that's what we got to be looking here. So it's not poor me, like this boogly wiggly just happened. It happens because of lifestyle. Most of the time it happens as a result of the postures changing. And they could be changing emotionally, physically meaning you can start sleeping on the side, for a decade at a time. And now your shoulders roll forward and you have misaligned the humerus, the bone that sits up in that glenoid joint. It's misaligned. So there are things we can do for this. One, you start to increase your ranges of motion. And yes, it's going to be a little uncomfortable. Good news, your chiropractor know how to do it. Your physical therapists know how to do it. Some of the real skilled massage therapists know how to help with this. And often you can get it adjusted. Your chiropractor can help you do that. And then there's also modalities. So we have that one unit, it's called a sound wave therapy, and you don't have to use it in our office, but you can start to break up that calcification and remodel it. So you break it up, increase the range of motion. I will say most of the time, if people are willing to put in the effort, they can restore at least 50%, sometimes up to 100% of the range of motion in shoulders that often are recommended that you need surgery and sometimes replaced. And it's not necessarily the case. It's a very dynamic joint in the event that you understand why it gets there. And it usually gets there because you have a decreased range of motion as a result of a lack of use or lack of proper range of motion. And it's also one of the reasons I'm such an advocate of yoga. So that one that, you put your hand up and behind you, and then you go ahead and grab it with the other hand. And it's one of the most eye-opening postures that you'll ever do in your life. Because you go one hand, you go back here and you're like, oh yeah, excuse my dogs here. I can grab my fingers, it's great. And then you go to do the other side. Maybe it is just me, but I think everyone is different left to right. And
yeah, it's not just you, Bart.
Okay, good. My one side, easy breezy. The other side, I'm like, whoa, something's wrong here. Someone broke my shoulder or something. And it's because we do things entirely different left to right through the course of our lives. And they're not balanced. And the beauty of yoga class that it does not discriminate. It exposes whatever is not, doing the same as the other side. And the beauty is then you get to work on it. And then over the years, even as you might be aging, you can be getting younger because you're increasing your range of motion. So if you know someone that's been diagnosed with frozen shoulder, calcification, all of those things that go with it hurts to move your shoulder and you're losing range of motion, whether it's to the side or up in front. It's usually the side is the one that you lose first. And then the one in front, and then, the side and going in the back, reaching behind you, the ones you usually lose first. But I've seen over the years them being restored back, and you think you're a new human being when you can start to reach for things without thinking about them again. So whoever has that challenge right now, make sure that you take action because it's definitely something that can be improved.
That is an incredible alternative to have as opposed to many other paths. Thank you for that. I think I can't believe it. We are very close to the end of time here. I think we have time for one more question, and it is the one that we love to close our Health Made Simple show with. So Bart, we have covered a lot of topics tonight. I'm curious to see where you go with this. Here it is. What is the one step that our listeners can take towards becoming superhuman?
I think it's simple. I think it's going to be just continue to improve your body awareness. It's not taught in schools. It's not encouraged often, yet learning about your own body, because ultimately it's the only one we got. And the more you learn about it, the easier. And that's why I say it, because the more you know your own body, the easier it gets to help and support it. That's it.
That is a great thing to add in. You all, thank you so much for joining us here on the Health Made Simple show. Know that you can send it out to your friends via podcasts wherever they catch them.
And of course, thank you everyone for being here, and keep doing your thing, keep sharing out, keep spreading the love. Of course, we're going to take deliberate action on each and every day for your mind, your body, overall wellness. Y'all be awesome.